to the ERwin Data Modeler R9 Workgroup Edition video on support for directory services. ERwin Modeling R9 introduces new capabilities in model management and collaboration. In addition to an innovative three-tier architecture and several licensing updates, this product release delivers support for MARC-based active model templates, introduces model-integrated NSM-DSM files, and provides a significant number of customer-requested product enhancements. The net result of these changes are better MARC performance, additional product flexibility, greater modeling options, and enhanced collaboration. This video is a demonstration of one of those changes. ERwin Data Modeler Workgroup Edition support for user authentication via directory services. Let's start by taking a look at the R9 MARC configuration dialog. This is easily accessed via the Start menu on your server or workstation. There are two tabs at the top of this dialog, and we are focused on the tab entitled MARC Server. All installations of ERwin R9 MARC Server require the top portion of this dialog to be completed. Only if the MARC admin wishes to implement directory services should the lower portion of this dialog also be completed. The lower portion of this dialog requires some very specific network domain information, starting with domain controller name. Now, the domain controller name is the name of one of your organization's network servers that responds to security authentication requests. The syntax for completing this information is specific to the authentication environment within your organization. As many organizations use LDAP, which by the way stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, we're going to use LDAP as our example. However, remember, regardless of the protocol implemented within your organization, if the information or syntax entered into the R9 MARC configuration dialog is incorrect, directory services will not work. Now, it's best to ask your network or IT infrastructure team for the required information. If you are sure that your organization has implemented directory services using either LDAP or Active Directory, and if you're permitted to execute selected network commands within your environment, you may attempt to determine the required information on your own using the command line tool nltest. Although you most likely will not be able to execute most functions associated with this tool, you will most probably be able to use this command to list the domain controllers associated with your organization's network. The syntax for determining your organization's domain controllers is really quite simple, and it requires only one parameter, the name of your organization's domain. In this example, the domain for a fictitious organization is fourthcoffee.com. When we run nltest using the required domain information, a list of domain controllers within that organization, or within that domain rather, are returned. You should see one of the domains marked with a notation PDC. That notation, PDC, refers to the primary domain controller. Although any of the domains in this list should work, if properly identified on the R9 MARC configuration dialog, it is recommended that you start by using the PDC controller information. So, using the PDC information retrieved from nltest as a part of our example, we're going to construct the required LDAP statement where our server name is fourthcoffee-dc-63, and our distinguished name is identified using an attribute keyword value pair. And in this example, we're going to use the attribute keyword DC, which stands for domain component. You should note that each element of an organization's domain is listed separately when using LDAP syntax, hence the two DC attribute keyword value pairs in this example. DC, however, is not the only attribute keyword that can be used to document a distinguished name. Therefore, other commonly used attribute keywords that you should be aware of are CN, OU, OL, all of which are listed here, but keep in mind this is not by any means an exhaustive list. One final point, when using LDAP syntax, you must also use a port number along with a server name. When identifying a domain controller name, we use what's referred to as the Global Catalog Query port, and that is 3268. So after we configure the R9 Mart server, we start the R9 Mart service again via the Start menu on our workstation or server. As seen here, there are two options available to start the Mart server. The discussion as to which one you should use is beyond the scope of this video. So let's continue by starting the server, or assuming the server is started, and then starting a web browser session. Into our web browser session, on the URL line, right, we're going to enter in an address that points to our Mart administration application. Now, assuming we've done this all correctly, we will see the R9 Mart Administrator login screen. We need to use our local Mart server administrator credentials to log into this application. We cannot use a Windows authenticated user or user information. It must be local server user. If we've got our login information correct, we'll see a list of administrative tasks that can be performed in the administrator application. These are the tasks that are highlighted in the upper left-hand corner. And now let's focus on the user management tasks. So once we click on user management, we'll see a list of all users authorized to use our Mart. There are three different types of users that are displayed in this dialog. The first grouping will be the local server authenticated users, including the user we just logged in as. The next group that's displayed are those users that are authenticated via our Windows authentication within our environment. The final grouping that gets displayed are groups based on the organization's predefined directory services information. All members of any of the groups shown here will have access to the R9 Mart, and there's no requirement whatsoever to identify each user individually. In addition to the list of Mart users, this dialog also allows us to grant and or revoke Mart access, as well as to reset user passwords via the menu at the top of the screen. If we click on the Add User menu item, a new dialog will be displayed that allows us to grant access to all three types of users. The group user is the one that is associated with directory services, so we should click on the Group User Radio button. Now, in order to grant new groups access to the Mart, we start by clicking on the search icon, which is a magnifying glass at the right of the group identifier entry line. When we do, a new Find Group dialog is displayed. On this dialog, we should enter our search criteria, and in this case, we're going to enter ERwin, and then once again, click on the search icon on the right of this line. Now keep in mind we should be very specific when we enter search criteria, because if too many groups meet the criteria, the search will fail and you will have to perform the search all over again. Now after you click on the icon, be patient. It sometimes can take quite a while to search through all the groups defined in your organization's global directory. Now while searching, the MART Administrator application will display an animated indicator that essentially lets you know that a search is being conducted. When the search completes, all groups matching the search criteria entered will be displayed in the lower portion of the Find Group dialog. At this point, we can select from those groups displayed the one we wish to grant access to the MART. When we click on the group name, it is highlighted and the Submit button becomes activated. Of course, we can change groups before clicking on Submit, or we could even cancel the operation altogether simply by clicking on the Cancel button. In our example, we will click on the Submit button to grant access to the North American ERwin group. After the Find Group dialog has cleared, we will see the selected group listed in the User Management dialog. All valid organization users associated with this new group now have default model creator permissions within the R9 MART. Default model creator permissions are defined on the Settings dialog. By default, the permissions granted to model creators is based on the built-in profile of Modeler. However, that can be easily changed as we have done in this example. Based on this setting, a modeler that has created a new model and saved it to the MART will not have any permissions whatsoever associated with that model after the initial save. The MART Administrator now must use the Permission Management dialog to grant or revoke permissions to specific models and/or libraries based on group affiliation or individual modeler requirements. In our example, we have granted our new group, the North American ERwin Users Group, modeler permissions across all libraries and all models in the R9 MART. The definition of permissions can be as simple or as complex as required. However, that topic is beyond the scope of this video, so we're not going to discuss it any further. In summary, ERwin Data Modeler R9 Workgroup Edition provides user authentication using directory services for organizations that have implemented Active Directory and/or LDAP. This capability greatly simplifies the administration tasks associated with defining and managing users and permissions across an R9 MART. Additionally, incorporation of directory services into the ERwin modeling architecture eases the tasks associated with development and enforcement of group-based modeling policies. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and don't forget to check ERwin.com for additional resources and product usage information.